The Garden Colony Incident. The morning sun cast long shadows across the vegetable gardens of New Eden Colony when the Zephyrian patrol ships descended through the atmosphere. Admiral Sarah Chen watched from the observation deck of the Orbital Defense Station, her weathered hands gripping the railing as 7 sleek vessels landed in the settlement's central plaza. "Ma'am, they're requesting permission to conduct a routine inspection," reported Lieutenant Morrison, his voice tight with barely concealed anger. Sarah nodded grimly. The Galactic Confederation had imposed these inspections on human colonies for 3 years now, ever since humanity had been classified as a developing species requiring supervision. The elderly admiral had fought in the Independence Wars 40 years ago, but those battles seemed like ancient history compared to this slow suffocation of human dignity. New Eden Colony housed mainly retirees who had chosen to spend their golden years tending gardens and raising livestock on the peaceful agricultural world. Most residents were in their 70s and 80s, content to live simple lives far from the political machinations of the core worlds. They posed no threat to anyone, which made the Zephyrian presence all the more insulting. Down in the colony, Martha Williams wiped soil from her hands as the alien soldiers marched through the settlement. At 73, she had seen enough of life to recognize bullies when she saw them. The Zephyrians stood 8 feet tall, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming in the sunlight as they moved with predatory grace through the peaceful community. "Another inspection," muttered Harold Kim, Martha's neighbor and fellow gardener. The 80-year-old former engineer shook his head as he watched the soldiers examine their modest homes. "They were just here 2 months ago." Captain Vextar led the Zephyrian patrol, his compound eyes scanning the human settlement with undisguised contempt. These primitive mammals disgusted him with their soft flesh and inefficient biology. The fact that they had somehow achieved faster-than-light travel was an insult to the natural order of the galaxy. "Begin standard protocols," Vextar ordered his soldiers in their clicking language. "Search for contraband technology and weapons." The Zephyrians stormed through homes with increasing aggression, overturning furniture and destroying carefully tended plants. They seemed to take particular pleasure in trampling the flower beds that the elderly humans had spent months cultivating. Martha watched helplessly as a soldier crushed her prized roses under his armored feet. "Please," called out David Chen, Sarah's 85-year-old father, who had retired to the colony after a distinguished career in xenobiology. "There's no need for this destruction. We're complying with all regulations." Captain Vextar turned his attention to the elderly human, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "You dare tell me how to conduct my duties, meat creature?" "I'm simply asking for basic respect," David replied calmly, though his hands trembled slightly. "We've done nothing wrong." The captain's compound eyes fixed on David with cold malice. "Your very existence is wrong, human. Your species should have been exterminated before you could spread your disease to the stars. What happened next would change the course of galactic history. Captain Vextar, either through sadistic impulse or calculated cruelty, drew his plasma weapon. The energy beam struck David Chen in the chest, vaporizing the frail old man instantly. The other colonists screamed in horror as the Zephyrian soldiers opened fire. Martha Williams died trying to shield her neighbor's grandchildren. Harold Kim fell protecting his wife of 57 years. Dr. Elizabeth Torres, a 90-year-old former physician who had spent decades treating alien diseases, was gunned down as she knelt beside a wounded colonist. In the space of 3 minutes, 7 of New Eden's most beloved residents lay dead in the town square. Their only crime had been living peaceful lives in a galaxy that suddenly seemed to have no place for human dignity. Captain Vextar surveyed the carnage with satisfaction. "File a report stating that the humans were concealing weapons and resisted inspection. The deaths were necessary for maintaining order. His soldiers quickly planted contraband energy cells among the bodies, fabricating evidence to justify the massacre. It was a routine cover-up, the kind that had protected Zephyrian interests across dozens of worlds. What they didn't realize was that New Eden's communication array had broadcast everything to the orbital defense station. Admiral Sarah Chen watched her father die through the live feed, her heart breaking as the man who had taught her to see beauty in all forms of life was reduced to ash by alien hatred. The other bridge officers stood in stunned silence as the massacre unfolded below them. "Orders, Admiral," whispered Lieutenant Morrison. Sarah's voice was steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Signal Earth Command. Full priority transmission. Tell them what happened here today." "And our response, ma'am?" The Admiral looked down at the settlement where her father's ashes mingled with the garden soil he had loved so much. "We document everything, every detail, every face, every word they spoke." Her voice hardened to steel. "Humanity will remember this day." As the Zephyrian ships departed, leaving behind their fabricated evidence and 7 bodies, they believed they had successfully covered their tracks. They had no idea that human surveillance technology had recorded everything in perfect detail, including their casual discussions about exterminating the human species. The news of the New Eden massacre reached Earth within hours through quantum communication networks. In government chambers, military headquarters, and civilian homes across human space, the images of elderly gardeners being murdered in cold blood sparked something primal in the human psyche. Martha Williams, who had survived the London Blitz as a child. Harold Kim, who had designed water purification systems that saved millions of lives. David Chen, whose research had led to cures for 3 major diseases. Elizabeth Torres, who had delivered over 2,000 babies in her career as a doctor. They had been humanity's grandparents, the gentle keepers of wisdom and memory. Their murders weren't just individual tragedies. They were an attack on everything humans held sacred about aging gracefully and finding peace in life's final chapters. The Galactic Confederation's response to the massacre was swift and predictable. They accepted the Zephyrian report without investigation, officially ruling the deaths justified under their enforcement protocols. No charges would be filed, no reparations would be paid. The matter was closed. What the Confederation didn't understand was that they had just awakened something in humanity that had been dormant for decades. The gentle diplomatic approach that had characterized human foreign policy since joining the galactic community evaporated in the flames of New Eden's burning gardens. In the depths of Earth's military command centers, generals who had never agreed on anything suddenly found themselves in perfect unity. The Zephyrian Empire had just taught them a lesson about alien mercy that would never be forgotten. Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the Joint Chiefs of Staff 3 days after her father's murder, her uniform crisp and her bearing military straight despite her grief. Behind her, a holographic display showed the faces of the 7 victims, each one a beloved member of the human family. "The Confederation has made their position clear," she reported with icy precision. "Human lives have no value in their calculations. Our elderly, our children, our civilians are all acceptable casualties in their vision of galactic order." General Marcus Rodriguez, the grizzled head of Earth's armed forces, leaned forward in his chair. "What are you recommending, Admiral?" Sarah's smile was cold as winter space. "That we show them exactly how much human lives are worth to us, and exactly what it costs to take them." The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. After generations of peaceful coexistence and diplomatic solutions, humanity was about to remind the galaxy why their species had conquered their homeworld through superior violence before ever reaching for the stars. The Confederation had wanted to know what made humans dangerous. They were about to find out that the answer wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their capacity for limitless, creative vengeance when their family was threatened. In the gardens of New Eden, flowers began to grow again over the graves of 7 gentle souls. But across human space, a different kind of seed was taking root. One that would bloom into something the galaxy had never seen before. The age of human compliance was over. The age of human fury had begun. The declaration of war. The emergency session of the United Earth Council convened exactly 72 hours after the New Eden massacre. Representatives from every human colony, military commander and civilian leader, gathered in the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva, their faces grim with purpose. The hall, which had witnessed humanity's first tentative steps into galactic politics, was about to host its most momentous decision. President Elena Vasquez stood at the podium, her usually diplomatic demeanor replaced by something harder and more dangerous. Behind her, the massive view screen displayed the faces of the 7 victims, their gentle smiles a stark contrast to the rage building in the chamber. "Fellow humans," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium, "we gather today not to mourn alone, but to decide the future of our species." In the front row, Admiral Sarah Chen sat with military precision, her hand resting on a data pad containing classified intelligence reports that would shock even the hardened generals around her. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of investigation, and what human intelligence had uncovered about Zephyrian operations went far beyond simple brutality. "The Confederation's response to the massacre tells us everything we need to know about our place in their vision of the galaxy," President Vasquez continued. "We are not partners. We are not equals. We are livestock, tolerated only as long as we remain useful and compliant." The audience stirred restlessly as classified footage from New Eden played on secondary screens, the casual laughter of Zephyrian soldiers as they planted evidence. Captain Vextar's recorded statement that human extermination was inevitable. The methodical way they had executed elderly civilians who posed no threat to anyone. General Rodriguez stood to address the assembly, his weathered face bearing the scars of humanity's early expansion wars. "Intelligence reports confirm what we suspected. The New Eden incident wasn't an isolated case of soldiers losing control. It was a test." Murmurs of anger rippled through the chamber as he activated a holographic display showing Zephyrian military communications intercepted by human signals intelligence. "They've been systematically probing human responses to increasingly aggressive actions, the trade sanctions, the inspection protocols, the seizure of our merchant vessels. All of it was designed to measure our tolerance for abuse." Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Earth's foremost xenobiologist and former colleague of David Chen, rose from her seat. At 78, she walked with a cane, but her mind remained sharp as a laser. "David sent me his final research before he died. The Zephyrians aren't just testing our military responses. They're studying our psychological breaking points." She gestured toward a display showing intercepted Zephyrian scientific data. "They've been experimenting on captured human civilians for 2 years, trying to understand what makes our species unique. David discovered they're particularly interested in human emotional bonds and our capacity for what they call irrational loyalty." The temperature in the room seemed to drop as the implications became clear. The massacre wasn't just murder, it was a laboratory experiment designed to measure human reactions to the systematic torture and execution of their most vulnerable members. Admiral Chen stood and activated her classified briefing materials. 3 hours ago, our deep space monitoring stations intercepted communications from the Zephyrian High Command to their forward fleets. They're planning to escalate their testing program." The holographic display shifted to show intercepted tactical plans. "Next week, they intend to target a human school on Tau Ceti Prime, 300 children between ages 6 and 12. They want to measure what they call Parental response parameters, when human offspring are threatened. The chamber erupted in shouts of rage. Delegates leaped to their feet, some calling for immediate military action, while others demanded proof of the intelligence. President Vasquez's calls for order went unheard for several minutes as humanity's representatives processed the scope of alien malice directed at their species. Captain Lisa Park of the Earth Defense Force's Special Operations Division stepped forward. Her unit had been conducting covert reconnaissance of Zephyrian facilities for months, and her report would change everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. "The experiments aren't limited to civilians," she reported with military precision. "We've documented 17 facilities across Zephyrian space where captured human soldiers are being dissected alive to study our pain responses. The Zephyrians appear to be fascinated by human neurochemistry." She gestured toward images that made seasoned warriors turn away. "They're particularly interested in human adrenaline production and our ability to fight effectively while severely injured. Several Zephyrian military manuals now classify humans as berserker-capable mammals based on their research." Dr. Tanaka's voice shook with barely controlled fury as she added her findings to the growing evidence. "David's research suggested they're trying to weaponize human psychological triggers. They want to understand how to break our species without having to fight us directly." The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the Zephyrian plan became clear. This wasn't simple aggression or territorial expansion. It was systematic dehumanization designed to reduce humanity to test subjects for alien research programs. President Vasquez retook the podium, her diplomatic training warring with the rage that had consumed every human in the chamber. "The question before us is simple. Do we continue to hope that reason and diplomacy will protect our children from alien laboratories? Or do we accept that some enemies can only be stopped through superior violence?" General Rodriguez activated the final set of classified materials, showing detailed intelligence on Zephyrian military capabilities and deployment patterns. "If we choose to fight, we need to understand what we're facing. The Zephyrian Empire controls 47 star systems and maintains a standing fleet of 12,000 warships." He paused, letting the numbers sink in before continuing. "However, their military doctrine is based on intimidation and superior technology deployed against inferior opponents. They've never faced an enemy capable of matching their technological advantages while exceeding their tactical flexibility." Admiral Chen stood beside the general, her voice steady despite the personal loss driving her recommendations. "Human military doctrine has always emphasized adaptability, creative problem-solving, and disproportionate response to threats against civilian populations. We've been holding back these capabilities to maintain diplomatic relations." She gestured toward classified weapons specifications that made the assembled generals lean forward with interest. "Our shipyards have been operating at 12% capacity. Our weapons research has focused on defensive systems rather than offensive capabilities. We've been playing by Confederation rules while our enemies write their own." The vote, when it came, was unanimous. 400 human representatives, speaking for 8 billion colonists across 32 star systems, formally declared the Zephyrian Empire to be an enemy of the human species. But the declaration went further than anyone expected. President Vasquez read the final resolution with iron in her voice. "Effective immediately. Any Zephyrian military personnel encountered by human forces will be considered enemy combatants engaged in crimes against humanity. No quarter will be asked or given. No prisoners will be taken. No mercy will be shown to any individual or unit that has participated in the systematic torture and murder of human civilians." The chamber erupted in cheers as she continued. "Furthermore, any Confederation species that supports or enables Zephyrian operations against human populations will be classified as enemy collaborators. We are no longer bound by Confederation laws regarding the treatment of hostile alien forces." Admiral Chen smiled grimly as she read the final military orders aloud. All human military commanders are hereby authorized to engage Zephyrian forces with full tactical freedom. Rules of engagement are suspended. Mission parameters are simple. Eliminate all enemy personnel and equipment with extreme prejudice. The words that would echo across the galaxy were spoken by Dr. Tanaka, her voice carrying the weight of human grief and fury. They wanted to study what makes humans dangerous. They wanted to understand our capacity for violence and vengeance. Now they'll have unlimited opportunities to observe both. As the assembly dispersed, urgent communications flew across human space. Shipyards that had been producing cargo vessels began retooling for warship construction. Military academies that had focused on peacekeeping operations shifted to assault tactics. Weapons laboratories that had been developing defensive technologies unleashed decades of suppressed research into offensive systems. The Zephyrian Empire had wanted to test human responses to systematic provocation. They had expected compliance, negotiation, or at worst a limited military response that could be easily contained. What they got instead was the undivided attention of a species that had evolved as apex predators and had spent the last 50 years pretending to be civilized. The humans were done pretending. Captain Vextar, still commanding his patrol fleet in the sector containing New Eden, received his new orders with typical Zephyrian arrogance. His superiors wanted him to escalate testing operations against human civilian targets to gather more data on their psychological breaking points. He had no idea that human intelligence was monitoring his communications, tracking his fleet movements, and preparing a demonstration of human capabilities that would reshape the galactic balance of power. The hunters had become the hunted. They just didn't know it yet. The human response Captain Vextar was reviewing intelligence reports on human colony defenses when his flagship's sensors detected the approaching fleet. At first, he dismissed the readings as a navigation error. The computer showed 12 human warships approaching his position at impossible speeds. But everyone knew humans lacked advanced propulsion technology. "Sensor officer, recalibrate your equipment," he ordered with typical Zephyrian contempt. "These readings are obviously malfunctioning." "Sir, I've run 3 separate diagnostics. The contacts are confirmed. 12 human vessels approaching at 0.7 light speed. They'll reach weapons range in 4 minutes. Vextar's compound eyes focused on the tactical display with growing concern. His patrol fleet consisted of 7 heavy cruisers, more than sufficient to handle any human military force. But the approaching vessels were broadcasting transponder codes he'd never seen before, and their acceleration profiles suggested technology that shouldn't exist in human hands. "Open a communication channel," he commanded. "I'll remind these mammals of their place in the galactic hierarchy." The main view screen activated, showing the bridge of the lead human vessel. Vexatar immediately recognized the human female standing at the command position, Admiral Sarah Chen, whose psychological profile had been thoroughly analyzed by Zephyrian intelligence services. "Admiral Chen," Vextar clicked in amusement. "I trust you're here to discuss reparations for the unfortunate incident at New Eden. Perhaps your government has finally learned the cost of harboring illegal weapons." Sarah's expression remained perfectly calm as she replied, "Captain Vextar, I'm here to deliver a message from the human species. Speak quickly, mammal. I have important duties to perform." Sarah smiled, and something in that expression made Vextar's tactical officer reach for the weapons console. "The message is simple, Captain. You and your crew have been classified as enemies of humanity. Under our new rules of engagement, no quarter will be asked or given." Vextar's mandibles clicked in laughter. "You dare threaten a Zephyrian battle fleet? Your primitive vessels are no match for our technology." "You're absolutely right about one thing," Sarah replied. "This won't be a match." The communication channel closed just as 12 human warships dropped out of hyperspace around the Zephyrian fleet. The vessels that emerged were unlike anything in Confederation databases. Sleek predatory shapes bristling with weapons arrays that defied conventional engineering principles. Vextar's sensors officer reported readings that made no sense. "Sir, the human vessels are showing energy signatures beyond our classification systems. Their power output exceeds our flagship by a factor of 10. "Impossible," Vextar snarled. "Target their lead vessel and prepare to fire." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The human fleet didn't wait for formal combat protocols or warning shots. They simply erased the Zephyrian formation from existence. The new human weapons were based on research that had been quietly conducted for decades in deep space laboratories, hidden from Confederation oversight. Plasma cannons that could punch through any known shielding, kinetic projectiles that could shatter capital ships, gravitational disruptors that could tear apart molecular bonds at the quantum level. But the most devastating weapon wasn't technological at all. It was the tactical doctrine that human military theorists had developed specifically for this moment. Total warfare conducted with surgical precision and unlimited malice. Captain Vextar's flagship lasted exactly 17 seconds. The other 6 Zephyrian vessels simply evaporated under concentrated human fire, their crews never understanding what had killed them. The entire engagement was over in less than 2 minutes. Admiral Chen opened a channel to the dying Zephyrian captain as his ship's life support failed. "Captain Vextar, you wanted to study human responses to the murder of our civilians. Consider this your final lesson in human psychology." She paused, watching him struggle to breathe in the vacuum created by hull breaches throughout his vessel. "We don't just fight to win, Captain. We fight to ensure that our enemies never threaten our families again. Ever." The channel closed as the last Zephyrian vessel exploded, leaving nothing but debris and radiation in the space where 7 warships had been moments before. Across Zephyrian space, similar scenes played out with mechanical precision. Human strike forces that had been secretly positioned for months revealed themselves and began systematic elimination of every Zephyrian military target they could locate. The shipyards orbiting Zephyr Prime, the Empire's capital world, detected incoming human forces just minutes before kinetic bombardment reduced their facilities to molten metal. Zephyrian fleet bases across 12 star systems simply vanished under human assault, their defenders overwhelmed by weapons technology that exceeded anything in Confederation arsenals. But the humans weren't just targeting military installations. They had spent 3 days studying Zephyrian society, government structure, and economic systems. Their response was designed to achieve complete strategic paralysis while sending an unmistakable message about the cost of threatening human civilians. General Rodriguez commanded the assault on the Zephyrian research facilities where human captives had been tortured and dissected. His forces moved through the installations with clinical efficiency, documenting every horror while eliminating every researcher, administrator, and guard who had participated in the experiments. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a xenobiologist who had volunteered for the rescue mission, found the evidence that would haunt human nightmares for decades. Detailed records of experiments performed on captured human children, video documentation of torture sessions designed to study human pain responses, research notes discussing the most efficient methods for breaking human psychological resistance. "General," she reported with tears streaming down her face, "they've been using human children as test subjects for 2 years. The experiments. They wanted to understand if humans could be conditioned to serve as slave labor." Rodriguez's response was to order the complete sterilization of every Zephyrian research facility, not just destroyed but rendered permanently uninhabitable through targeted contamination that would prevent any future use of the sites. The Zephyrian High Command, safely hidden in their fortress world deep within Empire space, received fragmentary reports of the human assault with growing panic. Fleet commanders who had been reporting victory over primitive human forces suddenly went silent. Entire star systems stopped responding to communications. Border defenses that had stood for centuries simply vanished from sensor networks. Supreme Commander War, leader of the Zephyrian Empire, finally understood the magnitude of the disaster when his intelligence services delivered their assessment of human military capabilities. The mammals hadn't been hiding their weakness during decades of diplomatic contact. They had been hiding their strength. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded of his tactical staff. "Current estimates suggest 70% of our forward fleets have been destroyed or are no longer responding to communications. The humans appear to be targeting military assets exclusively, but their weapons technology exceeds our defensive capabilities by significant margins." Kethvor's compound eyes studied the tactical displays showing red zones where Zephyrian forces had simply disappeared. "What about our allies? Surely the Confederation will intervene to prevent this slaughter." His intelligence chief delivered the news that would seal the Empire's fate. The Confederation Security Council has classified this as an internal dispute between member species. They've declared neutrality and forbidden any intervention on either side. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. The other Confederation species had seen the footage from New Eden. They had read the intelligence reports about Zephyrian experiments on sentient civilians. More importantly, they had observed the surgical precision with which humans were dismantling a major galactic empire. None of them wanted to become humanity's next target. The war, if it could be called that, lasted exactly 18 days. By the end, the Zephyrian Empire had ceased to exist as a military or political entity. Their fleets were scrap metal. Their government installations were smoking ruins. Their research facilities had been eliminated so thoroughly that xenoarchaeologists would struggle to prove they had ever existed. But the humans weren't finished. Admiral Chen, now commanding the largest human fleet ever assembled, broadcasted a message to every inhabited world in the galaxy. The transmission was received by billions of sentient beings across thousands of star systems. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, standing on the bridge of humanity's newest warship. 3 weeks ago, Zephyrian forces murdered 7 elderly human civilians in an unprovoked attack on a peaceful agricultural colony. Behind her, displays showed the faces of Martha Williams, Harold Kim, David Chen, Elizabeth Torres, and their 3 companions. Gentle grandparents who had died for the crime of growing vegetables and flowers on a distant world. The Galactic Confederation ruled these murders justified. They declared that human lives have no value under their laws. They classified the torture and dissection of human children as acceptable scientific research. The transmission continued with classified footage from the Zephyrian research facilities. Images that made hardened space marines vomit and caused riots on a dozen worlds where civilian populations finally understood the scope of alien cruelty. "Today, the Zephyrian Empire no longer exists," Admiral Chen continued. "Their fleets have been eliminated. Their government has been dissolved. Their military personnel have been classified as enemy combatants engaged in crimes against sentient beings." Her voice hardened as she delivered humanity's ultimatum to the galaxy. "Any species that threatens human civilians will face the same response. Any government that authorizes experiments on human captives will be eliminated. Any military force that targets human children will be hunted to extinction." She paused, allowing the implications to sink in across 1,000 worlds. "We are no longer asking for recognition or respect. We are no longer seeking diplomatic solutions to military problems. We are informing you of new realities." The final words would be quoted in history texts for millennia. "Humanity has decided that our children's safety is worth more than galactic peace. Act accordingly." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to contemplate a new balance of power where humans were no longer the junior partners seeking acceptance. They were apex predators who had revealed their true nature in response to an unforgivable provocation. In the ruins of New Eden Colony, flowers bloomed again over the graves of 7 gentle souls. Their deaths had unleashed something that would reshape galactic civilization, the focused fury of a species that valued family above everything else in the universe. The age of human compliance was over. The age of human dominance had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.